Hi, I'm Coleen Nolan, and this is my podcast, Let's Talk About Grief, a Reach production brought to you by Co-op Funeral Care. Over the 5 episodes, I'll be using this platform to chat to my special guests about their very own personal experiences of death, grief, and the ways in which they've chosen to remember their loved ones. Each week we'll touch on a different theme, from losing a parent, sibling, or spouse to dealing with grief in lockdown. We'll uncover how many guests handled the initial blow of losing a loved one, how and where they found support, and the coping mechanisms they continue to rely on to get them through the toughest of times. They'll also be sharing their best advice in the hope it'll help anyone out there who needs to hear it most. We'll also look at what happens in the weeks that follow the funeral and explore the many moving, creative ways my guests choose to keep the memory of their loved ones alive. I'll also be joined by Cruise bereavement specialists and Co-op Funeral Care team to share their valuable knowledge. My hope is that this podcast brings comfort and offers advice to people who need it most, whether it's someone suffering a bereavement or someone supporting them. This podcast is a Reach production brought to you by Co-op Funeral Care. Together, no one has to deal with bereavement alone.
I just made the most of every day. I didn't cry in front of him. I put my makeup on every day as if it was normal. Years before, we talked about death. Paul and I never look back. We live today. And I don't look ahead either much. And so, in some ways, that was easier for me. I don't think it probably hit me properly for over a year. I think you're in shock. You know, grief is, until you go through it, it's such a strange thing. And that first year, every time I had to come back to the house on my own, it was awful.
So I am joined now by the lovely Debbie McGee, former Strictly star.
Oh, thank you.
Should have won, in my opinion, can I just say. You're magnificent. And obviously married to the fabulous Paul Daniels. For how many years were you and Paul married?
Well, we were together for 38.
Wow.
But we were married for 29.
Wow. And you not only were together and married, you worked together and married. So was it almost 24/7, I guess?
Yeah, most of the time. And I mean, once we got married, I didn't put my career on hold because, of course, I could work with Paul. But I stopped pushing my career. I just thought, I looked at show business, and we both know it's so hard when you're working all the time. So jobs I'd be offered, if they were taking me away from Paul for longer than 2 or 3 weeks, I wouldn't do them. I wouldn't do any tours or anything. So I then just concentrated mostly on working with him.
Yeah, and you both became really famous for that. You know, Paul without you then just seemed odd. You know, whenever I saw him, I was like, oh, he's got to have the lovely lady. Otherwise I'm not watching. Sadly, Paul passed away. Take me back, if you can, to that moment of finding out he was ill, because it was quite sudden, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I mean, we'd done pantomime at Christmas, and all I could say was he'd lost his sparkle, and he always had so much energy, and he was like sleeping in late and, you know, dozing and things and going to bed as soon as we got home from the theatre. And Paul was never like that. He hardly needed any sleep. So I just thought, oh, he is getting older. Maybe Panto, we've just done a big tour and we had a week off before we started Panto. I thought, oh, maybe it's a bit too much, and maybe next year we just won't do a Panto. But then I just thought, no, he really has lost his sparkle.
Did he know he had? Did he feel?
He never said.
No.
So then just before we finished, he did have sort of what I'd call, he described it as a funny turn a couple of days before we finished Panto, when we were just at the flat we were renting, the cottage, and he said, oh, I felt really peculiar. He said, I'm going to go and lie on the bed, and he went to sleep for the rest of the day. And that just wasn't Paul. He didn't kind of nap in the afternoon or anything. So anyway, when we got back from Panto, I booked him an appointment with the doctor literally the next day. And they did loads of blood tests and kept coming back with, you know, he was vitamin D deficient, iron deficient. And then they said, we found it's pernicious anemia, which, don't worry, it's completely treatable. You have an injection a month, and he's going to have one a week for the next month, and then you won't be able to keep up with him. So he had the first injection, and then he wasn't improving, and he was literally falling asleep. He wasn't interested in anything. And so I took him back to the doctor, but our doctor was away, and the doctor we saw didn't know Paul. And I said, look, this person you are talking to, he might be joking with you, but this isn't him. He's normally full of sparkle and energy all day long. So he said, just bear with it. And then within another week, he was doing strange things and answering me in ways that wasn't normal. I'd ask him a question and he'd reply with something that had nothing to do with the question I'd asked him. So our GP was back then. So I rang up and he said, I'll come out and see you. And he said to me, yes, Debbie, there's definitely, this isn't Paul. There's something wrong. So he booked for him to see a neurologist, but we had to wait a week or something. And during that time, he really went downhill. He was getting weak. And so I gave him breakfast one morning and he was sick. So I thought, this isn't right. So I just called an ambulance and they, took him straight to A&E and did a CT scan. And within 2 hours, they knew he had this massive brain tumour. The consultant said to Paul, do you want to know what's wrong with you? And he just went, no, tell Deb. And so they took Paul back to the little ward he was in, and he said to me, it's a huge tumour. I'm surprised he hasn't had more symptoms than he's had. But there's absolutely nothing we can do, because even if we try radiotherapy or anything, it's gone too far. And, you do all the things, if this was somebody in your family, is this still the results that you would come up with, the diagnosis?
Yeah, you question them.
Yeah, everything. And, he said, look, he also worked at an Oxford hospital. He said, I've got a meeting tomorrow with, a whole group of oncologists and things. He said, I will put it by all of them. And then he rang me the next day and I was at the hospital with Paul, this other hospital in Berkshire. And he said, no, they've all agreed. We think he's probably got 2 months and just decide where you want him to spend those 2 months. They said he won't be in pain, but his brain might be affected because the tumour was pressing on the parts of the brain that process new information. Okay. So he could still, he was very bright. You work with Paul, so he could still watch Mastermind and answer all the questions that he knew. And if I asked him, do you want scrambled eggs on toast, something he knew, he could answer and he could talk to you quite normally. But if you asked him something new, that's what was happening. So I just decided I've just got to get him home.
How did you feel that they gave you that information? How did you?
Well, because
did he want to know from you, or
no,
he just didn't want to know? So
he just didn't want to know.
So you had to deal with that yourself.
And I don't know, because Paul was a very strong person, and I don't know how much of that was because he couldn't process new information. Okay. And by then he was perhaps realising it.
Okay.
So then he was in hospital for 10 days while I organised things at home. And during that time, he did go downhill a lot mentally, but he still knew everybody and he still was joking with people in the hospital and everything like he always had. I knew he wasn't going to get better. And, and things that I think back of, I took him a little portable TV to watch and loads of DVDs. And we watched, I think it was the Real Marigold Hotel. And in the middle of it, a young couple, or near the end, get married. And he had tears streaming down his face. And so to me, he was telling me he knew he was going to die. And so anyway, he did come home. He only lasted a month and 4 days. We never discussed it because he couldn't really talk about it because it was new information. But I just made the most of every day. I didn't cry in front of him. I put my makeup on every day as if it was normal. And we didn't go out, but the weather was quite good. It was February into March. So we walked around the garden in the sunshine or sat on the patio eating. He loved Magnum ice creams and had Magnums. And he loved Bradley Walsh and he loved The Chase. So we'd sit and watch that every afternoon. all the family got to see him, but, came separately so that it wasn't too much, so that they all got to see him.
And kind of say goodbye, I guess. Yeah.
And his grandchildren.
And did he know at the end?
No, I just think he must have known, but he just couldn't talk about it. So I couldn't ask him, what do you want for a funeral? Anything like that. I mean, years before we'd talked about death, and especially when his dad died, because he was so much older than me, he always said, it'll probably be me that goes first, and I was always, well, I could get run over tomorrow. But we never talked about kind of the logistics of what he wanted at a funeral. He'd planned life and his will as if it was him that was going first. So I didn't have to worry that, nothing was planned. He talked to two of his sons about what his plan was, so that they knew. So then I just thought, right, however long he's got, we'll just make the best of each day.
But that must have been so hard for you. So do you think you just held the grief off?
Yes, just totally.
Yeah. So you didn't think about...
No, I think and Paul was the same. We really have been people that live for today. And people talk to me about things I've done in my life and the TV shows and things. And I said, well, Paul and I never look back. We live today. And I don't look ahead either much. Yes, I love looking forward to a nice holiday. Yeah. But no, we did live like that. And I don't live in the past. Never have lived in the past. And so in some ways that was easier for me because I didn't dwell on anything. And I just got on with it.
And then what about... sadly, when he did pass, did it hit you then?
I don't think it probably hit me properly for over a year. I think you're in shock. Everybody's different, aren't they?
Yeah.
I couldn't give anything of his away at that time. That was a comfort that the house was still like it was. I did change the bedroom because that's where he'd been. But other than that, but somebody did give me some really good advice, and they said, change your routine if you had any kind of routine.
But again, that must be hard because you had with him.
Yeah. But
a big routine, I guess.
Well, sort of, but because in show business every day is different because you're in a different place usually. The only routine we had was in the mornings, and we always got up early, and we always had, a couple of hours together having breakfast, discussing anything. It was our time. And so and even now, that's still the hardest time. So once this person had said to me, change your routine, because she'd lost her husband a year before. I don't drink what I had in the mornings. All my life I'd had lemon and hot water and honey. I have coffee when I wake up. And at that early time of grief, I had my sister staying with me about 4 days a week. But on the days that she wasn't there, I went to the gym and I would have breakfast there and do a class and be with people, and then come back and just have a shower and get ready for the day. And I just got really busy.
But was there moments where you broke down?
Yeah, there was. And, grief is, until you go through it, it's such a strange thing. And I'd lost my dad 18 months before, who I was really close to. And I can remember with Dad, of course, I cried when he died. And I nursed him for a month before he died. I was with him every day. And I can remember after Dad dying, Paul and I were flying home we'd been working in America, and we were flying home. And suddenly I started crying and I couldn't stop. My dad's grief just came out then for no reason. I don't know whether it was because I was on a plane going home and he wouldn't be there, and he often would pick us up from the airport, or whether there was nothing else to think of because I was on an 8-hour flight. I don't know, but I can remember Dad's grief just like the floodgates opened. But with Paul, it was different. My grief was completely different. And I thought it would be like Dad's, of going in waves and dealing with it. But it wasn't, because when you lose your partner, your security goes. Everything that was kind of in life, every decision you made with that person. Well, we did, luckily, I think I dealt with all the finances. I paid all the bills for the house and everything. So I wasn't like one of those women that you hear of that never touched a checkbook. I did everything because Paul wasn't interested in money. He just wanted to make people laugh and play with his toys. And he would say to me, I want to buy so-and-so. Have we got enough in the bank? Yeah. Okay. So
You were the sensible
yeah,
one.
well, I suppose so. So in that respect, it made it easier because I'd already had control of all of that. But what I really found difficult was just that security.
And what about the loneliness?
And just that first year, every time I had to come back to the house on my own, it was awful. But I live in such a great community, and I've got really proper friends in my lane and in my village. And so all of them just said, knock at our door at any time. And I did. I just thought I'd come home from work, go in the house and think, I don't want to be in this house on my own, and just ring one of them and say, can I come up for a glass of wine, usually, if it was the evening, or a cup of coffee in the morning. And they'd just say yes. And they all did. And they're all still there for me now.
I love that because so many people say, I'm here, ring me, doesn't matter what time of day or night. But then as that person, you don't, because you don't want to, I better not trouble them. Or it's 3 a.m, they'll be asleep.
Yeah.
And the fact that you did.
I did. I went and knocked on the doors.
And they meant it. When people say that to you, they mean it.
Yeah, because and one lady who was an older lady who lives next door to me, still does, when Paul came out of hospital and he was at home and my sister moved in with us to help, every single day she cooked for us. But she didn't ring the front door. She knew I had a back door that would be open. She left a casserole or a big pot of soup and lovely bread on the draining board with a note saying put it in the oven at 180 for half an hour, knowing what it was like. And my sister and I have discussed this, that if she'd said let me cook dinner for you, we would have said no.
Yes.
And so now what I say to people, if you know somebody that's nursing somebody at home or they're ill,
just do it.
Just put it on the front doorstep and message them and say there's dinner on the front doorstep. And a few other people from my village left things by the front door. And the weird thing is, and you've been in this position, Coleen, when you lost your sister, people said to me, what's it like being in the public eye and going through it? It must be awful. And I said, no, it's the opposite. When you're somebody who nobody knows, you walk around with your grief inside and they don't know why you're being grumpy or sad. But when you're in the public eye, they know what you're going through. And what happened to me was that people weren't intrusive, but particularly women would just come up to me and give me a hug and walk away.
Yeah.
They didn't say anything. And it meant so much because the first couple of years, that pain inside you that you can't describe to people is so strong that you put on a smiley face and you get on with life. But you're walking around the shops with this huge pain, and I can't describe it, but, kind of in your diaphragm, isn't it?
Awful.
You
nothing
wake up
with it.
And nothing will take it away.
No.
You know your grief is getting easier by that pain is not there 24 hours. I had days where I thought, actually, I've just had an hour where I'd forgotten about it.
Yeah.
Or it wasn't there. And then you start to feel guilty that I put Paul out of my mind for an hour, that I shouldn't.
I think that's it, isn't it? There's a lot of, I know with my sister again, it's the guilt of not thinking them for an hour. Or, as a single, beautiful woman now, as you are, there's that guilt of, would I meet someone? Could I meet someone? Would that be disloyal?
Yeah.
And I think they're all the feelings that you have to go through as well. That guilt, it's always come down to guilt, really.
It is as human being.
Yeah. Do you have any things that make you go, oh, that's made me feel guilty, I can't do that?
I think within the first 3 years, probably, there are things you look back at that you always feel, perhaps I should have done that. I could have done that better. And then you realise, actually, what I've realised now is I did the best I could do at the time. But
do you feel guilty about decisions since he died that you've made where you think, I wouldn't have done that if Paul had been here? Or the thoughts of meeting anyone else or moving on in that respect?
No, I think Paul always said to me that he wouldn't have wanted me to be on my own. I just haven't met the right person.
No.
It's not something that I think, I could never meet anybody else. It isn't that. It's just I haven't. And I've had dinners. I've got loads of lovely male friends that will take me out for lunch or dinner. We really have a giggle. But meeting somebody and having chemistry with somebody is a different ball game. And I think especially as you're older, when you're younger, it's kind of it's a bit more, I wouldn't say fun, but I think when you're younger, you're also looking for your life partner, and I'm not now. I've had my life partner. I just want somebody that will make me
Almost
laugh.
like a companion
Yeah.
when you're older.
Yeah. And I know a lot more about myself, kind of thing. And I know what makes me happy, and I just feel very lucky that I've got amazing family, amazing friends, and that I can actually go out and have a really good time without needing to fill that void where Paul was.
Yeah. Which you are very lucky with, because lots of people don't have that.
No, they still feel
And I think
sad.
it's nice, going back to what you said, that we're very lucky in one way that we are in the public eye, so people do know about us.
Yeah.
And they come up and give you that random hug in the supermarket. So it's very important for us to say, if you know of somebody, you know, a neighbour or a friend of a friend even, to just now and again be there for them.
And just all those messages, and people always say, oh, I haven't phoned that person because we don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And I say,
That's the thing, we don't know what to say.
Just ring and say, I'm thinking of you. That's all you need, isn't it?
Yeah.
And my phone, I used to ping, 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 ping with all my friends, just saying, thinking of you, or just sending me a kiss or a heart or something to know that they're out there if I need them. And I think the other thing, and thinking about meeting somebody, is I never could understand why, when somebody lost their partner, they got married really quickly, and we all know it's different situations. You might have nursed somebody for years or whatever, so you've grieved while they were alive and ill. And I think it must be similar to divorce, because you're suddenly left on your own. I think in the first couple of years after Paul died, I didn't realise how vulnerable I was, and that because suddenly your support blanket's gone, it's not that you want to meet a partner, you just feel like you need that security. That I think if I'd met somebody then, I probably could have really easily got into the wrong relationship, which I know has happened to quite a few of my friends. And I'm just glad I didn't, because now I'm 6.5 years down the line. I'm very kind of content in my world. And if suddenly I meet somebody that there's a chemistry, that would be fantastic. But I'm not
But you
looking.
don't need it.
Yeah, I'm not looking for somebody thinking, I need a man in my life.
Yeah. So if you find someone now, it's because you want to, not because you need to.
Yeah.
You don't need anyone.
It's a big difference.
Do you still feel that, does the grief ever go?
I don't think it does. No, I really don't. If I wanted to, I could sit here and talk to you and cry my eyes out. I could bring images of Paul to me. It's like I really can't imagine him being on stage. And I can, if I want to, I can see him leaning on the microphone stand and, his whole cheeky persona. But I know, don't go there in my head.
Why do you feel you stop yourself doing that?
Because I know as soon as I do that, the floodgates open, and I still will cry like I did the day he died. I did speak.
But is that not okay?
Well, sometimes. But you don't want to do that every single day of your life.
No.
So I do have my moments where I choose to recall him in a sad way, really. But other times, like this year, I've been sorting out all his magic props and things because I feel I should pass on his legacy. I never look at them. It's unfair of me just to store them. And actually, at first, it was just so emotional the first week, and it took a few months. But after that, I actually got joy out of it, of remembering him and remembering him doing that trick, or we did that in a certain show somewhere. And I loved it. I found a poster with you on it.
No.
Yes, Fairfield Halls in Croydon. I won't say what year.
Please don't. Please don't. I'm still 18 in my head.
Yes, but it was when we were both young.
Yes, very young.
Lovely, with your sisters. And you did a season there with him, I think. And I did laugh. I thought, oh gosh, look at that. and finding things like that. But I think I do understand that some people in grief for years and years and years either just never go out, which I've got a friend that does that, or, just sit and really, they are just sad almost every moment of the day. But a friend of mine who is a grief counsellor said to me, when I started, I think, to really go through my grief about 18 months down the line, and it felt so real. The pain had gone and it was a different feeling. And he said to me, what it is with grief, Debbie, is people for a long time said that time heals. He said, it doesn't. He said, your grief always stays the size it is. If we say it's the size of, I don't know, an orange, a big orange. He said, you have to build a life around the grief that's bigger than your grief. And that's when you will be happy again. And that is what I believe now. I think that I'm so lucky. I get lovely jobs, and as I said, I've got wonderful friends. I've got an amazing family that really have always meant so much to me, but now mean even more. And, and I choose to, I just think however long I've got left, I was just so lucky to have Paul for all those years. I think, they all say that horrible quote, attitude of gratitude. But actually, if I'm having a down day, I just think, hey, some people live their whole lives without having what I had. I had this fairy tale, yes, all marriages go up and down, but I had a fairy tale marriage, and I had a man that loved me completely unconditionally that I really knew. And since he's died, I've found out more things that he proved how much he loved me. So why should I actually just live and dwell in my sadness of losing him? Because I actually had nearly 40 years of loving him.
That's an absolutely beautiful way of thinking about it, actually, because you're right. It's good to remember all the good times and how lucky you were.
And we laughed every day. He played jokes on me or I played jokes on him.
He was a right wind-up, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you could give advice to anyone out there who's, like yourself, become, a widow suddenly or after so many years, and what would you say to them if they were saying to you, I am never going to get over this?
I just think that you have to say to yourself that you have to accept that they've gone. Once you accept they've gone and just be grateful that you had them in your life, then it gets easier to carry on with your own. And just think, that's that life, and now I have to create a life for myself. And, you can't cling on to the past. You just have to keep, every day I've got pictures of Paul around the house and pictures of my dad and, who I lost very close to Paul. And I just, I talk to them and go, oh yeah, Dad, I've done this, what shall I do? Or Paul, come on, how would you have done that? And just don't forget them. It's not about pushing them away and forgetting them, but it's embracing what life you've got left.
Yeah. Is there anything you specifically do to keep Paul's memory with you, or Christmases, birthdays? Is there any tradition things you do?
At first, it was very hard to do anything that kept him in the forefront of my mind in the early grief. To keep going, he was so there that I didn't need to. And now, because it's, gone those few years down the line, he is always still with me. He just is. But what I do is I things like, I've still got lots of his shirts. So I wear his shirts around the house, or if I'm gardening. And that came from my neighbour. When she lost her husband, she gave all his clothes away to charity immediately. She said, Debbie, don't give anything away for at least the first year, she said, because I wish I'd kept hold of John's dressing gown, because that would have been something that was him. So I always remembered that. So I wear his shirts, but I I talk about him a lot.
What about his birthday? Do you celebrate his birthday?
Oh, always with his birthday, and his sons, because they live so far away from me or they're away working, we always talk about it. And at Christmas, I've started doing my Christmas cards, which are photographs of shows that we did. Because it's a way to send to my friends for them to remember Paul. And I asked a few of them, I said, would it upset you or whatever? They said, no, we'll love it. So last year I did a thing that was, we did a Scrooge Christmas special with Ron Moody playing Scrooge. So he was Fagin and Paul was Scrooge. So I did a picture. So I do things like that. But always celebrate his birthday. And even, I've just had my birthday and, I had...
When was it?
For Halloween.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm a real witch. I've had great birthdays. Yeah. So I had my
happy
batty
birthday,
earrings
I think.
And Paul always spoilt me and surprised me on my birthday. I mean, I had the memories I have of my birthdays with Paul. And if we were working, he would always make it special and then book us into a beautiful hotel wherever we were. And I mean, he was very romantic. Have I got time to tell the story? So one year we were filming the Magic series at the BBC, working 7 days a week, and we had 2 days in studio, 16-hour days. Got to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning, and they said, "Oh, by the way, I've got some good news for your birthday tomorrow." I said, "Oh, what?" He said, "I've managed to get us a day off." And I thought, "Oh, great, no rehearsals, I can just sleep all day." And he went, "But you've got to be up at 7, and you've got to wear something stylish, but with shoes you can walk in." Right, and this is the end of October. Anyway, he flew me to Paris for lunch for my birthday.
No way.
Every birthday I get up and I remember all these different things he did, which weren't quite as special as that, but always at beautiful hotels, or, a surprise birthday party that we had where he had the house filled with walking balloons that were pumpkins and witches. So, yeah, and I just talk about him. I think that's, because he was such a part of my life. And, I've made lots of new friends that kind of met Paul but never knew him. So I talked to them about him and what he was like and how he used to, in the village, make people laugh at the post office and stuff like that.
So it's important for you.
Yeah.
So you keep him alive in that way.
Yeah.
In your memories and sharing your moments with other people.
Yeah, and I've got photographs everywhere.
It's a fantastic way to go about it, actually. I cannot believe your birthday's Halloween. I bet he used that against you so many times.
Well, he did, because Houdini's birthday was on Paul's birthday, and he died on Halloween. So in the early days, he used to say to people, because you know what it was like, I only married her for the publicity, so I could say, Houdini's birthday's my birthday, and Debbie's birthday is the day he died, and she's going to have seances, and whatever, to see if she can get to me, because that's what Houdini's wife did after he died, and things like that. Was always saying, she's my current wife, I like to keep her on her toes.
Love that.
Yes, that bought me quite a few new pairs of shoes. Coleen, I had a fairy tale life. I've been sorting out Paul's stuff and different things that I've found, and with the auctioneer, and say, "Oh yeah, and that was, and we were," and I think you knew Paul and I not terribly well, but I think we're a bit like you, that we were very down to earth.
Yeah.
We went to flashy showbiz parties, and we were guests of people like Prince Rainier and the royal family. But actually,
that's nothing like me, Debbie.
Yeah, but we didn't do it.
Prince the Alsatian is probably the only prince I've ever
We
met.
didn't do it all the time. Our happy times were Sunday lunch with the family, or friends around for a spag bog or whatever. So I think that's also what's kind of comforting to me with Paul is, I cope with his sense of humour and all these things, and we had ways that we dealt with it. If I said, "Excuse me, that wasn't very nice," but I've seen a really lovely pair of shoes, darling.
Do you know what, Debbie? Thank you so much for coming in today. You're such a force, really, and
Thank you.
And so wonderful, and you always have been. And I'm very honoured.
Don't you make me cry?
No, genuinely, I mean it from my heart.
Thank you.
And you're a fantastic woman.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much
And
for
don't
having
cry,
me.
because you'll make me cry. So let's just leave it on that, shall we?
We shall.
Thank you. I am joined now by Tracy Harriman, who's a Co-op funeral care arranger. Hi, Tracy.
Hello.
Thank you for joining today. Co-op funeral care arranger.
Yes.
What does that mean? Or is it in the title? You arrange
It
funerals?
really is. Someone loses a loved one, they come and see me, and I put together a funeral for them.
Wow, and you're also a cruise bereavement support volunteer.
Yeah.
So what is some of the best advice you can share with someone who's just experienced a loss?
First of all, I would say whatever you're feeling is right, and it's okay. You may know someone else who's gone through a loss who didn't feel the same as you. Grief is very individual, so whatever you're feeling is absolutely right, even if people haven't felt it themselves.
There's no right way or wrong way, is there?
Absolutely no right way or wrong way. And I think one of the most prevalent theories over the last few years has been about the 7 stages of grief, or the 5 stages of grief as it was originally known. I think we've learnt more recently that actually we're a lot more holistic than that. So you might be feeling an awful lot of emotions at the same time, and that's right as well. You're not on your own. That's an important thing to remember. It's also really important to remember to reach out, because we're a little bit thick as humans, and we sometimes need to be told. And no one tells us how to grieve, and no one tells us how to deal with people who are grieving. And I think sometimes we feel we need permission.
Yeah.
We need permission to talk about the person we've lost. We need permission to approach someone who's lost someone, to talk to them. We don't want to feel as though we're going to upset someone by talking about grief. But actually, it's okay to go up to someone and say, it's Christmas. I know you lost your dad a couple of months ago. Just wondering how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do to help you? And it's okay if you've lost someone to actually bring that up as well. You may feel as though, we often feel that once the funeral's over, we've lost that permission to talk about our grief.
Do you think that's because as I always think this about funerals, that everybody leading up to a funeral, everybody is getting in touch with you, all got their memories, all phoning to check you're all right. Then everyone's there at the funeral, and the day after the funeral, because life goes on, everyone goes back to their life. And I think for me, having lost my mum, my dad, my sister, that was the loneliest time for me, because I thought, everyone's just carried on now.
Yeah. And when you're working up to that point of the funeral, you've got a goal. You've got somewhere to reach to. You're busy. There are things to be done. Once that funeral takes place, you're lost. There's nothing to do. And
people don't think you need them anymore. Whereas I think that's the most important time, to phone somebody and say, are you okay?
Yeah. And again, it's that thing, well, now the funeral's over, they're going to be moving on with their life, don't really want to bring it up in case I upset them. Okay. Whenever we see someone we've perhaps not seen even for just a day, we'll see them in the morning and we'll say, hey, how you doing? Morning, you all right? When you've lost someone, you might be feeling really rubbish. You might be having a bad day. The person that's asked you how you are might not know that actually it's your dad's birthday or something like that. And it's okay to actually say, rather than doing what we would normally do and saying, I'm fine. I'm fine. How are you? It's okay to say, do you know what? I'm having a really bad day. And I think that's what we're all a bit rubbish at, is that those that have lost someone feel as though they need permission to talk about it, and those that want to support those that have lost loved ones don't know how to start the conversation. We've got to be that little bit braver.
And speaking about funerals, is it, for anyone that doesn't know or is about to experience it, is it hard to arrange a funeral?
It's certainly hard emotionally. The actual practicalities of arranging a funeral, you really don't need to worry about. That's what people like me are there for. We'll hold your hand right the way through the process. We'll hold your hand afterwards if it's needed.
So what are the first things you need to think about for that?
For arranging a funeral itself? Well, again, that's something that we would guide you through. So if you have actually spoken to your loved one before they died, if you have some idea of what they actually wanted for their own funeral service, that actually makes things a little bit easier for you. So I would say that that's really important, is that you start the conversations early. Okay. But when you're actually sat in that room with a funeral arranger, it's hard. You're feeling incredibly emotional. Most people perhaps haven't arranged a funeral before. It's their first time. They don't know what to expect. We guide you through it. So you might be thinking simple questions like, are you looking for a cremation or a burial? Where is it to take place? Was your loved one at all religious? Do you need a religious minister? Would you like it to be more a celebration of life? But actually, we start the conversation by saying, tell me a bit about your mum.
Yeah. Because the thing is, a lot of people don't talk about the funerals, do they? So
No.
when somebody passes away, I guess the instant thing is, what did they want? Am I doing the right thing? I mean, do you guide them through that as well?
Yeah.
If they've no idea what the person wants.
We will give them as many options as we can. Funerals aren't necessarily the traditional religious services that they used to be. There are so many more ways of making a funeral unique, which is why we say, okay, talk to me about the person that you've lost. Yeah. Because the more you have that conversation with them, the better idea you will get of ideas that might help them to make it unique.
What do you think is the best way for someone to support someone after a funeral?
To be there, to talk, to offer themselves, to say, you know, when you say how are you doing, actually mean it, and wait for the answer, wait for the response. And actually bring up the fact that they'd lost a loved one, even if it's 2 months, 3 months, 3 years down the line. How are you doing?
Because there's no, as we've said before, there's no time limit, is there, on grief?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And equally, if you are grieving, to reach out, isn't it?
I think that's important, and I think also it's important to remember to be kind to yourself. I think particularly in the early days, as you've said, people will approach and want to be there for you and offer support. Sometimes that can be overwhelming, and you can actually think, I want some time to myself. I don't want to talk to anyone. If you need to, draw the curtains, turn your phone off. We've all got mobile phones. It doesn't mean we have to answer them. So if you need 20 minutes under the duvet, then you do that.
Or 2 days under the duvet.
Absolutely.
And crying. Some people find it hard to cry openly, don't they?
They do. And actually, I think it's also important to acknowledge that your body may not be allowing you to do that to start off with, and that's fine. I can guarantee somewhere down the line you will, but you may not cry at first. You might just be completely and utterly numb, totally shell-shocked, and your body is not allowing you to cry, not allowing you to grieve in that way.
So again, I guess it's open communication, talking, and not forgetting that after the funeral is possibly when people might need you more than ever.
Absolutely.
And to keep going.
Absolutely.
What are the ways to remember loved ones at Christmas, which can be a really melancholy time, generally?
It certainly can be, and it might just be following on traditions that your loved one had. They may have had a particular sweet that they would only buy at Christmas, so you might want to do that. It might be about keeping a seat free at the Christmas table for them. I know Debbie was talking to you earlier about how she would often wear Paul's shirts, which I thought was a really lovely idea. But actually, you can bring things like that into keepsakes and things that will actually last longer. You can have his shirts turned into a memory bear, for example.
Oh, that's a nice idea.
Yeah, there are lovely ways for perhaps people to remember.
She was also saying about how now she's now finally realised that she wants to look through all the stuff and maybe start to give stuff away to people or auction stuff off because she wants other people to remember him by. Again, no time limit on that, I guess.
No, and I think it's it can go one of two ways. People either want to sort through things straight away, or they need to give it time. They need to have time and face that when they're ready. And again, that's one of those things where there's no right or wrong. But items can have a real significance. It's not just memories. If you've got something physical there that you can focus on, then that can be a real help. So it may even be following the funeral service. If you've had a cremation service, for example, it might be somewhere to keep the ashes.
Sorry. Also, there's certain items that can bring people peace and help them get through things, isn't there?
Absolutely. We were talking about clothes for memory bears, but actually some people find it really, really difficult to sleep on their own if they've lost a partner. And sometimes it can just be taking an item of clothing to bed with them that perhaps has still a little bit of scent on from the person that they've lost. So actual physical items that maybe they've owned can have a real significance, but actually you can create new items. So we were talking about, perhaps making memory bears out of Paul's shirts, for example, which is a really lovely idea that can be done at the minute. But also it can be, if the person that's died has been cremated, there are so many ways and so many things that you can do with the ashes. You can have them made into jewellery, for example. Have particular urns or keepsakes that the ashes can be kept in. And that can make a real difference, because you can keep a small part of them with you.
And it brings so much comfort.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming in today, Tracy.
You are very welcome.
Lovely to meet you.
You too.
This podcast is a Reach production brought to you by Co-op Funeral Care. Together, no one has to deal with bereavement alone.